I didn't expect to hear those words. Not in that tone. Not from her. My stepmom said, "You're mine tonight." It sounds worse than it was. Like some drunk promise at a bar. It wasn't like that. It wasn't even night when she said it. It was late afternoon, a half hour before the shop closed. The smell of warm rubber and motor oil filling the air, and I had grease on my hands, trying to coax an old Civic into starting again. She walked in like she owned the place. Not in a rude way. More like she knew exactly how people looked at her, and she'd learned to carry herself before they could decide anything about her. She had this dark green coat, cinched at the waist, a little too warm for the day but clean, pressed. Everything about her was like that. Slightly overdressed for this part of town, hair pinned back but not too tight, makeup subtle, like she was letting you know she cared without asking for attention. We didn't talk much before that day. She was my dad's wife barely 3 years in. We circled each other in family gatherings, polite nods, small comments about food, the weather, my classes. Never more. She said, "Engine trouble again?" Like she'd been following my complaints from across the dinner table. I nodded, wiped my hands with a rag that did nothing but smear the grease around. "Yeah, stubborn starter. Might have to replace it." She leaned against the counter. Not the kind of lean that says, "I'm tired," but the kind that says, "I'm staying here a minute." "Your father around?" "He's at the hardware store," I said. "Won't be back for a bit." She hummed, a low, almost absent-minded sound. Her eyes wandered over the cluttered wall of keys, bolts, belts, like she was pretending to care about any of it. And then, softer, like it wasn't even meant to reach me, "You're mine tonight." I froze. It wasn't even flirtatious. The way she said it, slow, deliberate, like she'd decided on the words but not the meaning yet, felt heavier than a joke, lighter than a confession, like it carried something I wasn't supposed to hold. I think I stared too long. Long enough for her to glance over, catch my confusion, then almost smile, like she wanted to rewind but couldn't. She changed the subject. "Your dad wanted me to pick up the invoice for the Johnson job," she said, clearing her throat. "Do you have it?" I handed her the folded sheet, my fingers brushing hers by accident. Her skin was warm, not soft, not rough, just alive. And for a second, it felt like something in the air had been rewired. We didn't speak for a moment. The clatter of tools from the back, the distant sound of a truck outside. Everything seemed too loud in the pause we left behind. She tucked the paper into her bag, looked at me again. Not away, not down, but at me and said quieter, "Don't stay too late." Then she left, the bell above the door ringing like nothing had happened. But it had. I worked for another hour without touching the car. Just sat on the stool, staring at the cooling metal, my hands still dirty, my chest too tight. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. It was 2 weeks before I saw her again. This time, it wasn't the shop. It was the house. My dad had asked me to fix a drawer in the kitchen that kept catching on the frame. He wasn't home yet. Stuck at the store, a shipment mix-up or something. She was, though. She opened the door like she'd been expecting anyone but me. A flicker of surprise, then something that looked almost like relief, then gone. "Oh, he didn't mention you were coming," she said. "Drawer," I said, holding up my little toolbox like that explained everything. She stepped aside. "Right, come in." The house was quiet, too quiet. No TV humming in the background. No music, just the sound of her slippers on the hardwood. She led me to the kitchen, pointed at the drawer. "Keep sticking. I've been yanking it, probably making it worse." I crouched down, started unscrewing the track. She stayed in the doorway at first, arms crossed like a shield she'd forgotten she was holding. After a while, she drifted in, leaning on the counter opposite me. "You've gotten good with your hands," she said, then winced like she'd heard herself. "I mean tools. You know what you're doing." "Yeah," I said, pretending not to notice the stumble. Been fixing stuff since high school. Kind of peaceful, actually. She gave a soft laugh. Not her usual controlled chuckle, but a quick, unguarded one. It startled both of us. I glanced up. Her hair was looser than usual, a few strands escaping like they'd stopped obeying her hours ago. The lines under her eyes were softer, tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Her hands fiddled with the edge of a dish towel, twisting it without purpose. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. She blinked, then looked away. "Long day," she murmured. Then quieter, "Long couple of years, if I'm honest." That cracked something in the air. Not between us, but around her. Like for once she wasn't performing the role of wife, hostess, polished perfection. Just a woman, mid-40s, a little worn, trying not to let anyone see the weight she carried. I tightened the last screw, tested the drawer. Smooth now. No catch. "All fixed," I said, but my voice didn't sound steady to me. She smiled, small, real. The kind that doesn't ask for anything, just thanks you without words. For a moment, neither of us moved. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have. A car passed outside, too far to matter but suddenly intrusive. She reached for the drawer, opened it like it might break again, then closed it carefully. Her hand stayed on the handle a beat too long. When she finally looked up, her eyes caught mine. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It rained, the kind of rain that made the whole town feel hollow. Not a storm, not thunder, just a steady, cold sheet that blurred everything outside. Dad was out late again. Supply run. Always something with the shop. I'd stopped by to drop off a set of receipts he'd forgotten. Thought I'd just hand them over and leave. She answered the door barefoot, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. Not her usual version of herself, no makeup, no armor. She stepped back, motioned me in like it was habit, like she'd been waiting for someone, even if not me. "You're soaked," she said. "Hang your jacket on the chair." I did. The house smelled like rosemary and something faintly burnt. A candle flickered on the table, half melted, crooked in its glass. "Dad not home yet?" I asked, trying not to sound like I cared too much. She shook her head, poured herself a glass of wine, then hesitated, held the bottle in my direction. "Want some?" I almost said no. Instead, "Just a little." We sat at the table, across from each other, rain tapping the windows like it was trying to get in. She didn't talk much, just small things, quiet things. Asked about school, if I still liked working at the shop, if I was seeing anyone. "No," I said too fast. She smiled like she'd heard more than the word. "Not easy to meet someone when you're covered in grease all day." "Guess not." There was a moment, maybe two, where neither of us said anything. Just the sound of rain and her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, slow, absent. I couldn't stop watching her hands, the way they moved like they carried weight they never put down. Then softly, she said, "Sometimes I think I made a mistake. It wasn't about me. It wasn't even fully about Dad, not yet." But the way her voice cracked on mistake made something inside me lean toward her. "You didn't," I said, but I didn't know what I was defending. She looked at me, really looked, like maybe no one had met her eyes in weeks. A phone buzzed on the counter, loud in the quiet. She flinched, glanced at it, Dad's name glowing, then let it ring out. She didn't move toward it. I shifted forward, elbows on the table. She didn't lean back. We were closer than we'd ever been without touching. Her breath caught. Not a sigh, not a gasp, just a pause like her body hadn't decided what to do yet. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, "You should go now." And I did. But only my body left that room. I avoided the house for a few days. Told myself it was because of school, work, errands. But really, it was because I didn't know what to do with what hadn't happened. Then Dad called, asked me to drop off a part. Couldn't say no. She answered the door again. This time, her face gave nothing away. No sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. No candlelight. Just her. Composed. Polite. Like the last time had been a dream we both decided not to admit to. "Parts in the box," I said, holding it up like a shield. She nodded, stepped aside. "You can put it on the counter." I did. The house felt too clean, too quiet, like it had been scrubbed of us. "Is he here?" I asked, already knowing. "Not yet." We stood in the kitchen, two people orbiting the same silence, neither sure who should speak first. Finally, she exhaled. Not a sigh, just air leaving a body that had held too much of it. "We can't keep—" She stopped, bit down on the word like it hurt. "Whatever this is, we can't do it." I leaned on the counter, staring at the wood grain because looking at her felt like asking for pain. "We haven't done anything." Her laugh was short, humorless. "That's not the point." The fridge hummed. A clock ticked too loudly in the other room. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "What are we doing?" I asked, finally lifting my eyes to hers. She looked at me like the question was both a relief and a wound. "I don't know," she said. "I keep thinking it's nothing, just proximity. But then I see you, and I don't feel like myself anymore." The words landed like a confession neither of us had wanted. I stepped closer without meaning to, just enough that I could smell the faint trace of her shampoo, something floral, almost hidden. "We could stop," I said, though I didn't believe it. Her hand twitched at her side, like it wanted to move and didn't trust itself. "We should," she whispered, but neither of us moved. Seconds passed like they'd been stretched thin and left in the sun to dry and crack. I watched her eyes. Not darting, not searching, just wide, glassy, still. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. Dad had me run another errand, like nothing in the air between us had changed. Maybe to him it hadn't. Maybe we were both just better liars than we'd expected. When I got there, she was at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes, a mug of tea gone cold beside her. She didn't look up right away. Her thumb kept running along the edge of one envelope, like she couldn't decide whether to open it or burn it. "Didn't hear you knock," she said eventually, voice low. "Door was open, right?" I set the package on the counter, stayed standing a little too long. Something in her posture, the curve of her back, the way her shoulders folded inward, felt wrong, like she was trying to take up less space than usual. She finally looked up. Her eyes were red. Not fresh tears, but the kind that had dried a few hours ago and left their quiet damage behind. "You okay?" I asked. She almost smiled. Almost. "I got a letter today." I waited. "It's from my sister. I haven't heard from her in over a decade. She sent a photo of my nephew. He's—" She paused, rubbed her thumb against the corner of the envelope until it bent. "He's your age." Something shifted. Not in the room, inside her. Like someone had pulled out a brick from the wall she'd built, and now the whole thing was deciding whether to fall. "I used to take care of him," she said, eyes still on the envelope. "When my sister couldn't. I loved that kid. He'd sit at the counter while I made dinner, tell me about the girl he liked, the fights he got into at school, the things he was afraid to tell his mom. Then one day he was gone. Just like that. My sister took him back, moved states, changed numbers. I never got to say goodbye." Her voice cracked on the last word. Just a hair. But it felt like a window breaking in a quiet room. I didn't know what to say. She finally met my eyes. "You remind me of him," she whispered. "Not in a way that's fair to you. But sometimes when you laugh, when you walk into a room, I feel like I'm seeing a ghost. And it wrecks me." The rain outside tapped a steady, numb rhythm against the glass. I hadn't even noticed it had started. I pulled out a chair, sat down across from her. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't speak. I just stayed there, breathing in the same still air, waiting for something in her to settle. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. The house was dim when I came by again. Not late, just gray outside. The kind of light that makes every room feel like it's waiting for something. She was on the couch, legs folded under her, no TV on, no book in her lap, just sitting there, like she'd been still for a while. "I brought the carburetor," I said, setting the box down by the door. My voice sounded too loud in that soft, waiting air. She nodded but didn't move. "He's at the store," she said. I stood there for a beat too long, then sat in the chair opposite the couch, toolbox still in my lap like I didn't know what else to do with my hands. For a while, we didn't talk. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy but steady, like a ceiling beam carrying weight it had gotten used to. Finally, she said, "I don't know what happens next." I looked at her. Her face wasn't guarded. No mask, no polite distance. Just tired eyes, soft mouth. Like she'd been through too many versions of herself today already. "Maybe nothing," I said. "Maybe this just stays between us. Quiet." She gave the smallest nod. "That would be the kind thing." We sat with that. Let it hurt. Then, after what felt like a long time, she whispered, "But it doesn't feel like nothing." I swallowed. My chest felt too small for everything in it. "No," I said. "It doesn't." Her hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles pale from the pressure. I didn't reach across right away. I waited until her fingers loosened, until her shoulders dropped half an inch, until her eyes, those careful eyes, found mine again and didn't look away. Then I reached over, slow, no sudden moves, and let my hand cover hers. Warm, fragile in a way that wasn't physical, like touching a memory you weren't sure would stay. She didn't pull back. We didn't kiss. We didn't even lean closer. We just sat there, her thumb brushing the edge of my hand once, maybe by accident, maybe not, and the air between us shifted, not brighter, not darker, just real. She closed her eyes for a second, like it was the only way to stop them from spilling over. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. Looking back now, it's strange how quiet the turning points were. No big declarations, no slammed doors, no one screaming that the world was unfair. Just two people who weren't supposed to find each other, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt like the only honest place we had. We didn't run off together. We didn't burn everything down. We carried on, at least from the outside. Work, family dinners, all the usual scripts. But something in me had shifted, like I'd been walking through my own life on autopilot, and then someone quietly reached in and turned the key. She changed, too. Not in the way people imagine, no new clothes, no sudden laughter. It was subtler than that. A softness where there'd been steel. A kind of presence. Like she'd stopped bracing for impact all the time. We didn't touch again for a while. We didn't need to. What sat between us wasn't hunger anymore. It was understanding. Private, quiet knowing. She taught me something I didn't expect to learn. That love, or whatever this was, isn't always about possession or even action. Sometimes it's about the way someone sees you when you didn't even know you wanted to be seen. About what grows in the spaces you both protect instead of fill. I'm older now. I've loved people since. I've fallen, I've broken, I've built new things out of the pieces. But nothing has ever felt quite like those weeks. The ache, the restraint, the way every silence carried a choice in it. Sometimes I catch myself remembering the sound of rain against her kitchen window, or the way she held her breath before letting me take her hand. Little things, quiet things, they stay with you, not because of what could have happened, but because of what didn't and how much that still meant. If you're watching this, maybe you've had someone like that. Someone who changed the temperature of your whole life without even touching the thermostat. And if you haven't, maybe this is your reminder. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones that explode. They're the ones that stay quiet, just long enough for you to feel them sink in. Thanks for listening. If it stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone, or made you see something differently, tell me in the comments. I'd like to hear your version of the quiet ones.